Hello everyone and welcome to this beginner's tutorial on how to make a locomotive. Now keep in mind that the people that love trains really love trains, and there are a lot of details one can get into, especially considering the naming and the actual functionality, the realism, etc, etc. For me, I've kind of made a dumbed down version of that kind of works how I would expect a train to work in my head, so it's not really 100% realistic, or not even probably 50% realistic, but it's good enough for me. So I'm going to be showing you the basic concept. Now, while this is a build that took a long time and polished and all that stuff, it is a relatively simple or basic idea. So with the train track being as such, all you got to do is go into your workbench, type in train, and then you'll see all these different types of propulsion units. Now, the ones that have power or RPS are as such, and then you have ones that are unpowered. A simple terminology is locomotive, that's the powered unit, and rolling stock, which is the unpowered unit. So these ones have the wheel release, wheel slip, and brakes, but they don't have the ability to put power into the track, whereas ones like these do. So you can see really it comes down to, you get these guys here, the single wheels, small assembly if you will is what it's called, that have power, and you just got to be careful to make sure your arrow is facing that direction there. And you could put in something like this, and you see here this little node is where you put the power to. So these are the so-called classic wheels. Then you have the wheel assembly here times 2, and all them that are powered have the RPS node. There are single assemblies that also have RPS, so these ones are not for the rolling stock. And you can see there's one called small, which looks like this, and then there is a 1x wheel assembly that looks like this. It's kind of bigger, physically larger, even though they take up the same space in terms of the hitbox, but it just looks smaller, maybe for shunter units or something. And then you have your ×2, and you have your ×3. Now, I didn't run the experiment, so I'm not going to claim that putting a ×2 will give you more friction, double the friction as a ×1, and then a ×3 will give you 3 times the friction of a ×1. I don't know, but what I will say is that you could build your own wheel assembly, kind of how these look here, by taking one of these units and attaching a second wheel to it as such, and then putting power to the two of them. So you see here how this works is the power on top we can connect like this. Actually, let's leave it exposed so you could really see what it looks like. So we could do that and then put a pipe there. Now you see there is no midpoint because I put them 2 apart, which isn't ideal. Putting it 3 apart or 1 apart would be a little bit better. Let's just go 3. And then what I do want to do is put a pivot. Now we need to put a pivot that has the ability to put power through, such as this one, or more recently this small one. This is new, but we now have a small power pivot. So what we can do is put a T-piece like this, connect the bodies, and then using our small power pivot like this, and then this would become the body of the train, this portion here. Now I do want to warn you that if you're starting from the tracks up like what I just did, you got to be careful because the red body is your main body. So now in this case, the green is not the main body, yet the green part is the part that will be the locomotive. So I do recommend, if you're building it, to actually build the locomotive first and then go down and attach the wheels. So in this case, what I would do is just join everything together like this, and then I can go and separate the wheels, and now the red body becomes the actual locomotive. It's not 100% imperative, because your creation will still work if you don't have your main body, the red one. The problem is that you will experience issues in certain applications, and it's just better practice to keep the red one your main one. So now what we can do is complete our wheel assembly with our pivot. So you can see we have a couple different types. Like I mentioned, we could do that and put that in. So now the power goes in through there. From there, the next step would be to put power into this RPS node. So what we're going to do is just put a motor, medium motor like that, and that will provide power to this system. So keep in mind, we got our red, we got our green, and what we will need to do in the case of this is make another set over here, and I'll want to join these two together like that. So our red bodies become the main locomotive part, and then we have our bogies, I believe they're called, but in essence they're just the wheels with kind of an axle that spins. We're gonna stick to layman's terms here, because I'm assuming if you're watching this you are maybe not very familiar with trains, but regardless, with this contraption now, all I'm going to do is put a pilot seat somewhere here, and we're going to add the W and S controls into these two motors. So here is our train. Now for the beginning part of this tutorial, we're just going to turn on infinite electricity. We're going to sit here, and if I push W, we're off to the races. Now obviously this speed isn't very realistic, but keep in mind we're at full throttle. Now if I press S, it'll start to stop and go in the backwards direction. You could see this kind of sparking. That is kind of what it looks like when your train loses traction or starts to slip. So to make this look a little bit better, now again, styling is all on you. I'm just here to teach you the basics. But what I'm going to do is put a throttle lever right here, and this is what's going to go into the motors, front and back. Then I'm going to put another throttle lever right next to it, and this is what's going to go to the brakes. Now the brakes themselves can start off at 1, and then you have to disengage them, whereas the throttle will start off at 0 and you have to engage it. So that's sort of the system I have. Now again, we're using full-on electric, infinite electric, but the nice thing with the new update, these wheels don't have it, but if you were to use one of these, you'd actually be able to siphon electric power from the grid. So let's first do that. So you can see if we just replace that system with this already pre-built wheel system, you can actually have this stealing the power. Now for this, you don't want to attach electricity to it, you want it to kind of spin freely, but this now has the ability to use power from the tracks. So obviously again, we're going fast, we're going to handle that in a second, but now if I slam on the brakes, you could see it came to a stop. Now it's still kind of pushing forward while also still trying to brake. Why was it doing that? Well, because the back wheels did not have the brake applied. So only the fronts were locking up, the back was pushing. So you want to make sure to include the brake on, all your brake wheel assemblies. And you see the release, that's a new addition, a very good addition. We could actually lift the whole train off the tracks, but we're not going to worry about that here. It's just a very simple on-off switch. So with this train right now, what we could do is throw on some mass and see what starts to happen, because obviously you're going to be loaded down with multiple train cars, all kinds of things you're trying to tow. And to be frank, the more the weight, then there has to be a bit of a system that makes the wheels not slip. But just before I go there, I will mention how we're kind of siphoning power off the tracks. That is brand new as of a few days ago. So previously you couldn't do this, but how you'd mitigate that is you'd have a diesel, electric, or battery powered or turbine or whatever in your train locomotive, giving power to the thing and providing power to these motors. So in this case, we could actually take the power right from the wheel assembly into all of our parts of the locomotive. But if you don't want an electric locomotive, then you'd put a generator. I have a video on how to make a generator. I'm not going to cover that here. But in essence, you'd need a generator that is powerful enough to keep the train charged up even under full throttle, or turn down the throttle if you are, having these things. Now take a look at that. So throttle all the way up. Now we are just kind of slipping the wheels because of all this weight. Now eventually we might get to a point where it doesn't slip anymore, but there's got to be a way to fix that, isn't there? Now before I start teaching you incorrect things, let us go ahead and remove this and apply the exact same wheel bogies to this. Bogies are what we call them in the engineering world that I'm in, not for trains, but for movable conveyors or stacker reclaimers stuff. We call these bogies. But anyway, so now I have two of these wheel axles, and we can even siphon power from this one. So now we are doubling that up, and I got to remember to apply our brakes to here, make sure the arrow is in the right direction. And now let us tackle this. So what I'm going to do is put an indicator that is going to turn red when the wheels are slipping, and we're going to put one for the front and we're going to put one for the back like this. So this one goes here and this one goes here. So with those two indicators there and getting power, and I'm going to spawn this in, I'm going to turn off the electric because we don't want to be infinite electric anymore. So now we turn this down, turn this up, so we're getting slipping. If we turn that, there we go, no slipping. So now we're moving all this weight even with this throttle, and you can see we're kind of speeding up. To put a very rudimentary display with a speed or a speedometer, just to give us the proper idea of how fast we actually are moving in this situation. Now keep in mind, I would always recommend you put a breaker, but I'm not going to show you how to build a nice locomotive. So what I would do, holding control, is turn off or disable all these. So we're going to siphon power into this A is always my hot, and then put power into all of our units there, not the pivots, because we want them to move freely. And now in this case, that can be our main power source. So I would put that somewhere. The weight is just there to mimic if we had like a bunch of rolling stock. So in this case we don't, but it's supposed to reenact a ton of weight on our locomotive. So you saw these lights were flashing, or they were on. I'm gonna go ahead and put a function for the speedometer just so we can get a reading. And the reading is important because there is sort of a number we want to reach. In here, let's just go with miles an hour or kilometers an hour. I'm in Canada. Let's go kilometers an hour, just like that. So now if I do this, you can see we are having slip, but we are gaining speed. Now if I turn this down a little, you can hear that went away, and these now are off. And we're actually gaining speed very quickly. So this is kind of an interesting thing with Stormworks. And you see that when I hit that above 3, we're getting, oh, above 2.8, above 2.6. So it seems that 0.26 is kind of the throttle that will give us no wheel slip. And you see the speed is still increasing. So at this point, like if you want to turn it down, you could. And that's where like it comes in with if you want to put a microcontroller to limit the speed and make it a bit more realistic, because now like a train flying at 200 kilometers an hour exists if it's a bullet train, but not if it's like one of these diesel electrics that we have puttering around North America. Those ones probably go only like 100 or something. So those are systems we could do. Now you saw here, once we hit over top of that 0.26, it started to slip out or spin out. So we could limit this to 0.26, but my preference is always to make a microcontroller. So I have an empty microcontroller slot. I'll just place it right here. And what we're gonna need to do is put a few things in here. So we will need the actual throttle. It's coming in as a number. And we're gonna need the throttle out. So this will be throttle to, or throttle out simply, but that's the throttle that's gonna go to the motors. And then what I always like to do is separate my forward and backwards. So it'll be a reverse gear in essence, but what it will do is it will invert whatever it is we're trying to do. So I could put a numerical switch box and have my number when it's off is the regular throttle, and when it is on, it'll go through a function that will just take this, and it will, first of all, this has to go here, attached to the reverse, and it'll take the throttle into here, and it'll just negative X. So it literally just inverts the number that's going to the motors, throttle out. Now this function doesn't limit anything to 0.6, so, or 0.26. So what we could do is have a clamp, but the problem I find with clamps is, say you limited this to 0.26, the second you hit 0.26, you are at full throttle, and anything else you're putting through on that lever is not, also, first of all, and so anything going through this clamp will be limited to 0.26. So when you're at 0.5, it's still 0.26. It's a bit of a waste of your throttle lever, and this negative expression won't work because of this. So what you will, because it's going to be clamped. So you could clamp it if you were to do this to negative and positive 0.26, and that would probably work. But instead of doing that, what my preference is to actually add a function and attach it here to the throttle itself that goes then to this and to this. In this re-uploaded video, this expression was previously incorrect, and I was pointed out by 2x4 inverse pyramid. So here, what we're going to do is put x multiplied by 0.26. So when you're at you're putting their throttle at 1, you're actually at 0.26. When you're at 0.5, you're at 0.5 multiplied by 0.26. So this way it ensures your number does not ever increase over top of the 0.26. Previously, I divided it and I was teaching you all wrong. So thank you 2x4 inverse pyramid for pointing this out. Make sure you multiply x by 0.26. And then in this case, we have our expression here with our numerical switch box, switching it if we want to go in reverse and all that good stuff. So this is now where we are going to put our throttle in, and throttle out is going to go to our motors, front and back. And of course, we add a button for the reverse. So what we can do is put a toggle, and that will switch the signal and make us go backwards. So the nice thing is it keeps the actual system of the throttles clean. I don't really like when I have a throttle that has -1 and 1, because that middle ground, unless you're perfectly at 0, you're gonna get a little bit of play. And of course, yes, you could make it like between 0.1 and -0.1, it's actually 0. But for me, I just like a separate reverse button. I just like to be in control when I'm reversing. And if we spawn that in and take a seat, we can take the brakes down, turn up the throttle, and it will accelerate nice and smoothly. And if we turn this down, apply the brakes, we've come to a stop, and then put on the reverse, turn down the brakes, turn up the throttle. We're now going backwards. Again, no slippage, nice and clean system. Now, say you want to put that speed limiter I mentioned to you, because you obviously might not like your train to go super fast. Obviously, there are instances where that is good, and if you're not really trying to do realism, but if you're trying to make a realistic type of train, we could do that. So we're going to have our speed sensor input, and what that will do is be put through a function, and that function will be x multiplied by, and then we find our conversion factor here. So what do we want to use? Let's go with miles per hour. So 2.236936. So with that value now, we are calculating out the speed, and we now can put a greater than function. So if our speed is greater than another value that we can put here in a property slider, and we could set this to max speed, and what we can do instead is have, like, let's go 100 miles an hour, and we can put ourselves a starting value of 60. Actually, 100 miles an hour is quite fast, so we don't want to do that. And let me just go back here and see what we're using. We are in fact using kilometers an hour here, so let's be consistent, because then we could actually check it. So we're just going to multiply this by 3.6, as it says here. And if we are, so yeah, let's stick to 65 kilometers an hour. So 100 can be our max, or 120 or whatever, but let's go to 65. And maybe the rounding can be 5. Anyway, when we are greater than this, then what we can do is cut the throttle out, for example. So you could see here we have a throttle, and it will cause a bit of pulsing sensation, but this is a very, very rudimentary system. So when it's off, we're good. If it is on, we're cutting that power. Of course, do not forget to attach the speed sensor to that controller, and you can set it to horizontal just so it really tracks the horizontal motion of the train. If we turn this down, turn it up, we're accelerating smoothly, and we're gonna hit that speed limiter, and there we have it. Now it's gonna bounce a little bit up and down on there, but it pretty much stays at that level that you set. And the last thing I'm going to show you is how to make a signal switch. So you may have seen all these various signal switches around the map, and how do you control them? What is the way to switch them? Well, first things first, what I'm going to do is go ahead and put a push button. And the way that this system will work is we're going to go ahead and take another empty microcontroller. Need all this stuff removed. And we're going to add a few things here. We're going to add number output for the radio frequency. We're going to add a radio output signal. And we are going to add an input for our button. So with these three elements here, we can go into this and set the radio frequency has a constant number. So all we need to do is constant number, and it is set to frequency 440. Now, if you know anything about locomotives, the AC 4400 is a very powerful locomotive. So Google that, and I'm sure you will never forget why this is 440. And then we have our button, and we have our radio, and all we got to do is put a composite right. So we're going to find the composite right on off, just like this. And in channel 1, we're going to insert this, and in radio, we're going to insert this. So with this system now, we have the button that we're going to place here. And let's try, like I said, with push and see if it works. So we're going to go into the button, and we do need a radio. Now, I do recommend using a small one because we don't need the reach to be far. So when you are pressing this button, you're also pressing the transmit mode. The radio frequency goes to the radio frequency, and the radio composite goes to the radio composite. Make sure everything is powered up to your electricity, and let's take her for a spin. So now we have the button there working. Let's go a little closer to those switches, and then we'll see exactly if our button system works. So I'm going to stop us once we get a little closer right here. Okay, so you see those switches there. The left is red. Okay, now if I press this button, the right is now red. Now I'm just a little closer just so you could really see it switch live time. So see, as I press the button, the signal is dancing up above there. Now obviously this is just scratching the surface, a very beginner tutorial. Of course, to connect to other trains, it gets complicated and dicey. I mean, the simplest way is just to put something like this with an electrical connector, for example, and then your other rolling stock could have the same but opposite type of thing over here, just like this, and so on and so forth. But to now transfer signals through and have the rolling stock break and whatnot, we're not going to go into those details here. Another thing to keep in mind, or kind of a summary, is either you could siphon power from the grid, as we're doing here, or you have to have a generator that keeps up with the demands of your motors. You have these various systems. I saw that I now put 2-speed. We don't need 2. All we need is the 1-speed sensor, so we could remove that. And of course, to make a nice train kind of body and stuff, that's all on you. I mean, I'm just here to give you a very, very basic idea of what you could do in the game of Stormworks and how you could kind of make this system your own. So there you have it. We got a simple train. It's not that difficult, but it does require a bit of patience with the fine tuning, specifically of the generator, specifically of the various systems, but to just get something that's going down the track that you could switch the signal for, you could hit reverse and whatnot. Actually, I think I put the button there. That was supposed to be the signal switch, but regardless, you kind of see the idea of what one can do And of course, you can now take this and take it to the next level on your own time. So, thank you all for watching. Thank you for commenting, supporting the channel, being awesome. I do want to thank all of my supporters who are my YouTube channel members and my Discord server boosters. They give me extra support and I give them early release videos. I give them other special benefits, early release creations and that type of thing. But I do want to thank each and every one of you for participating, for commenting, for watching the videos. And it really means a lot. I really do appreciate that. So I hope that that gives you a bit of confidence knowing that we're here as a team, and I love to work with all of you, and I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that we all kind of like helping each other as a community. It's quite fun. So thank you for watching, and until next time, happy Stormworksing, everyone.